Hey guys, tonight we begin a long, disorienting and slightly itchy stroll through ancient China, a place of wondrous invention, brilliant dynasties, and daily routines so foreign that, well, you probably won't survive this. Not without losing a sandal, your composure, and maybe your dignity. The sun hasn't even crested the mountains yet, but your eyes flicker open. Why? Because someone's banging on a gong loud enough to wake Confucius himself. No alarm clocks here, just raw percussion echoing off the clay walls of the modest village house you've somehow ended up in. There's no glass in the windows, only latticed wood covered with oiled paper, so the morning air pours in sharp and damp, hinting of smoke and something faintly herbal. You sit up, still wrapped in coarse hemp bedding, and bump your head on the low wooden beam above. First lesson of the day: don't sit up too quickly in 2,000-year-old architecture. Your stomach rumbles, so you shuffle to the hearth where your host, an overworked peasant with extremely efficient eyebrows, is already poking at a pot of cold rice. That's breakfast, just rice. Sometimes it's reheated with broth if you're lucky, but today it's just congealed, clammy white blocks. You wonder about coffee, but no, tea exists, but it's not for you, at least not this early, and definitely not in this house. The rice is eaten with wooden chopsticks so slick from years of use they're practically polished. You manage to lift a few clumps to your mouth, drop several, and are quietly pitied. No one says anything, but a nearby chicken watches you with open scorn. You hear village dogs barking in the distance. Not pets, more like mobile burglar alarms that sometimes bite, sometimes don't. A child squeals outside, possibly because a goose is chasing him. That's just how the morning goes here. You try to step outside and immediately regret not wearing shoes. The ground is damp, strewn with straw, and generously decorated by livestock. You tiptoe back inside and are handed a pair of wooden sandals. They're stiff, blistering, and roughly the comfort level of stapling 2 planks to your feet. As the haze of dawn lifts, you notice how quiet everything becomes. No buzzing phone, no honking cars, just the steady rhythm of human activity. Sweeping, coughing, shouting, chewing. You take a breath, and the scent of burning straw and manure hits you like a philosophy exam you didn't study for. You glance at a faded painting above the doorway, an ancestral shrine, modest but meticulously clean. A pot of incense burns, faintly beneath it. You bow out of respect, unsure if it's necessary. It is. Bowing is always necessary here. You'll learn that, the hard way. Historians still argue whether ancient Chinese rural life was harsh by absolute standards or simply misunderstood through a modern lens. But it's safe to say, from your bleary, barefoot vantage point, that survival would depend on adapting fast. Because soon, someone will hand you a bucket, point at the village well, and expect you to carry water back uphill without spilling a drop or throwing out your back. The bucket is heavier than your dignity. You walk past the neighbours' homes, you glimpse a mix of bustling preparation. One woman is feeding pigs while breastfeeding a baby, multitasking at its finest. A man is stacking dried reeds into tidy bundles, each motion practiced and efficient. No one wastes time. No one has time. You notice the silence between sounds. No mechanical hum, no distant highways. Only the wind, the chickens, and the occasional loud sneeze from someone's grandfather. You realize that life here isn't slow. It just has a different rhythm, one that you, tragically, have no idea how to keep up with. A fun fringe fact: the early Han Dynasty elite sometimes used jade plugs to preserve bodily purity after death. Not relevant right now, but a nice distraction while your shoulders scream from lugging this cursed bucket. By the time you stagger back to the house, your hands are red from the wood, your legs are shaky, and your rice breakfast has fully worn off. And it's barely mid-morning. You sit down on a stool that is exactly too low for comfort and wonder how anyone made it past Tuesday in this place without modern orthopedic support. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I'd love to hear from sleepy travelers around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear another gong. It's time to start your day. Again, you decide it's time to freshen up. Unfortunately, in ancient China, freshening up is less a spa experience and more an exercise in controlled discomfort. The concept of a modern bathroom doesn't exist. Instead, you are guided, wordlessly, around the back of the house where you encounter a small wooden shed and a truly haunting pit latrine. No door, just a hole in a plank. A vague smell of despair. The flies are already there, holding a union meeting. You do your best, squatting like your survival depends on it, because frankly it might. You try not to look down. You try not to breathe. You pray you don't slip. And when it's over, there's no toilet paper. Of course not. There's a stack of husked corn cobs and a bucket of grey water with something floating in it. You choose neither and shuffle back to the house, humbled and forever changed. Back inside, your host is scraping together a small bowl of water for you to wash your face. It's cold, very cold. You splash it over your skin, and it feels like being smacked by an icy fish. There's no soap, just coarse salt and something resembling ash, a gritty blend that exfoliates your dignity. For dental hygiene, you're handed a twig, a literal twig. Locals call them chewing sticks, and they've been used for thousands of years. The wood is from aromatic trees like willow or Chinese licorice, and when you gnaw the end, it frays into bristles. You awkwardly chew and scrub, wondering if this counts as brushing. It does, apparently. Some studies even suggest it's as effective as modern toothbrushes, but that doesn't help you feel less like a confused panda. And don't even think about minty freshness. The flavor is more earthy sage with hints of desperation. Historians still argue whether these ancient hygiene practices were driven by spiritual beliefs or pure practicality. Some scholars think the simplicity masked an elegant understanding of microbiology. Others think it was just what they had lying around. You try to rinse your mouth with water from a clay jug, only to have a bit dribble down your chin. Someone watches you from the doorway and shakes their head slowly. You are failing this time period, and it's not even breakfast anymore. To make things worse, someone hands you a cloth and gestures toward a pile of laundry. Laundry here is an outdoor ritual involving boiling water, pounding clothes with wooden paddles, and a riverbank if you're lucky. You are not lucky. You're given a basin, a soapberry fruit, and a rock. Good luck. The soapberries are natural saponins, and yes, they work, sort of. But they also make your hands slimy and smell faintly like damp wool. You start scrubbing, only to realize you've been handed someone's undergarments. Possibly. Your hosts. Possibly their grandfathers. You don't ask. Mid-scrub, a goose ambles over and honks directly at your face. You lock eyes. The goose wins. Eventually, you rinse the clothes as best you can, wring them out with shaking arms, and drape them over a bamboo line that sags under the weight of heavy linen. Your lower back has begun filing complaints. At this point, you've earned a rest, but there's no couch, no armchair. You sit on a woven mat beneath the eaves, sipping barely warm barley tea from a cup chipped in 3 places. It tastes like haywater, not unpleasant, just confusing. You glance around and notice how clean everything is. Despite the mud, the smoke, and the sheer effort it takes to do anything, this household is orderly, swept, and maintained with pride. The hearth is stacked with precisely aligned logs. The tools are stored neatly. Even the chickens walk in single file. A quirky tidbit. Elite Tang Dynasty households sometimes employed servants whose sole job was to fan the master with goose feather contraptions while he napped. You wish you had one now, because the sun is beginning to rise high and you're sweating through your borrowed robes. As you lean back against the wall, you catch a faint, familiar smell. Not manure this time, something spicy. Could it be chili? No, not yet. Chilies didn't arrive in China until the Columbian Exchange. Whatever you're smelling is likely Sichuan peppercorn, garlic, or ginger, ancient native spices used liberally in every region. You're told it's time to help with lunch. You groan. The day has barely begun, and already you've endured twig brushing, latrine trauma, and laundering a stranger's unmentionables. Still, you rise. Your sandals squeak, the goose watchers squeak. You return inside and are told to get dressed properly. You glance down. You're already clothed in what you assumed were humble yet functional robes. But no, these are your waking robes, not your going outside and not humiliating your ancestors. Robes. Ancient Chinese society had very specific rules about attire, and unfortunately, you are breaking several. A trunk is opened and out come layers. You are handed a plain, ankle-length tunic made of hemp, tied at the waist with a sash that takes 2 people to knot. Over this comes a slightly stiffer outer robe, the kind that rustles loudly whenever you breathe. Your sleeves are suddenly huge. You could smuggle entire dinner rolls in them. You wonder if people did. Probably. Your host adjusts the collar, left over right, always. Right over left is only for the dead. You note this just in time, as you were seconds away from a culturally catastrophic mistake. And then the hat. It's a modest linen cap, tied under the chin with delicate string, and you look like someone's disappointing nephew who failed his civil service exams. Which is, coincidentally, exactly how you're now treated in public. You step outside and realize everyone else is similarly layered, except somehow more dignified. Their robes are cleaner, their hats less crooked, their sashes not unraveling in the breeze. You, on the other hand, resemble a very apologetic dumpling. Fashion in ancient China was more than aesthetic. It was law. Entire sumptuary codes dictated who could wear what. Silk was reserved for the elite, and you are decidedly not elite. If you're caught wearing the wrong fabric or color, someone might assume you're impersonating nobility. And impersonating nobility can end with a bamboo beating, or worse, an exemplary punishment involving public humiliation, and, if you're truly unlucky, exile. Historians still argue whether these dress codes were rigid across all dynasties, or more fluid in rural areas, but one thing's clear. You are not blending in. The quirky detail of the day. In certain dynasties, some government officials had to wear embroidered chest patches displaying their rank, often featuring animals like cranes or lions. Your chest is mercifully bare. If it had anything on it, it would probably be a startled goat. As you walk toward the market square, your wooden sandals clack noisily over packed earth. Every step sends a puff of dust into your robes. The road is uneven, studded with stones, and just wide enough for 2 ox carts to pass, if they both hold their breath. Children run past, pointing and giggling at you. One calls you Wobble Uncle. You try to bow, forget the angle, and nearly tip over. A local woman helps you straighten up and then walks off laughing, shaking her head like someone who's seen too many tourists fall into ditches. You pass a group of scholars standing in a dignified cluster, all discussing poetry and voices so quiet you have to lean in to hear. Mistake. One of them steps back, notices you hovering, and raises a single eyebrow. You step away. Fast. You are not scholar material. You finally arrive at the edge of the open-air market, just as a line of ducks waddle past your feet. The smell hits you first, a pungent blend of pickled vegetables, dried seafood, animal dung, and something aggressively fermented. Your eyes water. Your nose rebels. Somewhere, someone is boiling vinegar. Stalls are set up under red cloth awnings, each one managed by a different vendor, shouting their wares with surprising musicality. One sells steamed buns. Another sells firewood bundles stacked like mini log cabins. One old man offers live frogs, and yes, they are indeed hopping everywhere. You make the mistake of stopping near a cart stacked with cured duck. The vendor grins toothlessly and offers you a sample. You accept. Your teeth bounce off it like it's lacquered leather. It tastes faintly of smoke and regret. You spot a stall with cloth strips and attempt to admire them, but the seller waves you away. Silk is not for the likes of you. He gestures toward the hemp pile with a kind of pity that stings. Suddenly, a goat sneezes beside you. You begin to wonder if ancient China is trying to eject you like an incompatible organ. A nearby monk offers you a small scroll, smiling peacefully. You unroll it. It's a hand-painted prayer, and surprisingly beautiful. You bow in gratitude. He bows deeper. You panic and bow again. Now you're stuck in a recursive loop of bows, each lower than the last. A child walks by and whispers, "It's the wobble uncle again." Eventually, you stagger away from the market, clutching your aching sides, your bowing muscles sore, your dignity lightly frayed. You're learning that survival in ancient China isn't about brute strength. It's about knowing when to bow, what to wear, and how to chew duck jerky without pulling a molar. You shuffle out of the market, dazed, robe flapping in the breeze like a defeated kite, and your stomach starts to make sounds that resemble a rusty hinge. Cold rice has long since worn off, and the duck leather you gnawed on has done little, besides scratch the inside of your mouth. Luckily, or not, there's food everywhere. Unluckily, it smells like everything at once. The market's lunch stalls are now in full swing, and you're immediately surrounded by a swirl of aromas, garlic sizzling in sesame oil, pungent black vinegar clouding the air, an aggressive whiff of fermented tofu, and something fishy that has no right being that confident. You gravitate toward a corner where people are crowding around a bubbling clay pot. A vendor with 3 teeth and no patience ladles out something steaming. You hold out a bowl you were handed earlier, plain, chipped, possibly haunted, and you're served a portion of what appears to be soup. You poke at it with your chopsticks and identify a mushroom, something leafy, and is that a duck foot? A fringe culinary tidbit. In some regions of ancient China, duck feet were considered a delicacy, gelatinous, chewy, and ideal for absorbing sauces. You pretend to know this. You pretend to be brave. You slurp. You immediately regret it. Historians still argue whether common market food in ancient times reflected regional sophistication or simple resourcefulness. One scholar's cultural ingenuity is another's, "Please stop feeding me organs." You try something else. A steamed bun the size of your fist. It's fluffy, piping hot, and, surprise, filled with chopped radish and preserved mustard greens. It's not bad, though. You were hoping for pork, or cake, or anything remotely sweet. You spot a stack of rice cakes dusted with sesame and powdered beans. Aha. You take a bite. It tastes like slightly sweet drywall with an aftertaste of patience. Everywhere around you, people are eating while standing, crouching, or perched on baskets. A group of men drink from shared jugs of rice wine, loud and red-faced. A few children pass you a skewer of candied hawthorn berries, bright red, sticky, and surprisingly delightful. You smile, they laugh. You check your teeth in a bronze mirror later and find you now look like a character in a morality play. The market pulses with a life of its own. Bakers kneading dough on stone slabs, herbalists arranging rows of dried fungi, fishmongers slapping live eels into barrels. You notice a woman expertly wrapping zongzi, glutinous rice bundles in bamboo leaves, tied with reed string and steamed until fragrant. She moves like she's done this since birth, which she probably has. You attempt to help. You wrap one crookedly, the rice leaks, and a bird immediately tries to steal it. You lose the battle. The woman smiles kindly, then takes over with a speed that blurs the leaves in her hands. A moment later, a commotion breaks out near a meat stall. You crane your neck and see 2 men arguing over whether the displayed pork is actually dog, ye meat. A vendor sighs and raises his cleaver. The argument ends. You quietly decide on vegetarianism, at least until the next dynasty. You duck into a shaded corner where someone is boiling tofu in a thick, spiced broth. It smells incredible, but looks like molten lava. You blow on a piece and cautiously nibble. It burns your tongue, then your soul, then your memory of taste. You cry a little. The vendor hands you tea and pats your shoulder. You sip the tea gratefully. Though it's bitter, and smells vaguely like twigs. This is not bubble tea. This is not even sleepy time chamomile. This is roasted barley or bitter chrysanthemum, designed not for pleasure, but for balance. Everything is about balance here. Hot and cold, sweet and sour, hard and soft, duck and foot. Somewhere in this sensory whirlwind, a man walks past carrying a live turtle under one arm. No one bats an eye. You briefly consider the possibility that the turtle is also lunch, then choose not to pursue the thought. You leave the market with a full belly, an empty wallet, pouch of strings and coins, and a vague concern about everything you just consumed. You passed on the pig blood soup, politely declined the preserved eggs with blackened shells, and narrowly avoided an invite to try jellyfish salad. Small wins. Still, something is brewing in your stomach. Something mutinous. You make your way back toward the village lane, passing a modest temple adorned with red prayer banners. Smoke rises from incense pots, and a monk watches you serenely as you hobble by, clutching your middle and whispering ancient apologies to your digestive system. At the corner of the square, an old man in robes is selling tiny pickled things in jars. One contains whole lizards. You do not stop. You finally reach a shaded spot beneath a tree. You sit, fanning yourself with your sleeve, heart pounding, mouth tingling with chili oil, brain reeling from so many unfamiliar textures. You made it through your first real meal in ancient China. Barely. Tomorrow, perhaps, you'll try the steamed fish head with fermented bean paste. But not today. Just when you think you've earned a break, a moment to digest both lunch and your questionable life choices, a stern-looking man with a forehead as furrowed as a freshly ploughed field waves you over. You, still burping sesame oil, wobble upright, turns. Out you've been volunteered to assist the local scribe. You assume this might involve sitting quietly, perhaps handing over scrolls, maybe nodding respectfully now and then. It doesn't. It involves work, the writing kind, the bureaucratic kind. You're escorted to a small, stuffy pavilion near the edge of the village, where an elderly man with ink-stained fingers presides over a desk, crowded with bamboo slips and brushes that have clearly seen better dynasties. He looks up at you, sighs deeply, and gestures to sit. You're given a brush, a shallow dish of ink, and a stack of bamboo slips bound together with string. Your first task? Copy a list of grain distributions for the county granary, in triplicate. The brush wobbles in your hand like an anxious squirrel. You dip it too far into the ink and end up with a blob the size of a beetle. Your first character looks like a crushed insect. The scribe peeks over your shoulder and audibly groans. Writing in ancient China isn't just a task, it's an art, a virtue, a test of your entire soul. The strokes must be exact, the spacing uniform, the rhythm meditative. And here you are, blotting characters like you're signing for a pizza. Historians still argue whether literacy among lower classes was more widespread than official records suggest. But one thing is clear, you are not helping the average. The scribe mutters something about ill-omened fingers and takes the brush back, assigning you a less sacred task, untying scroll knots, dozens of them. Your fingers cramp after the third. You develop a newfound respect for string. Between tasks, he quizzes you on Confucian virtues. You mumble something about loyalty and not falling asleep at the desk, and he raises an eyebrow so high it nearly joins his hat. You pass, but only because someone outside shouts about a runaway pig. Outside the pavilion, two farmers wrestle with a squealing piglet who's decided it's no longer domesticated. A crowd gathers to cheer. The scribe sighs again, this time wistfully. You're given another task, translating weights and measures from one scroll to another. You try to appear competent, but the ancient system of units is baffling. What even is a dan? Why are there 5 kinds of liang? Why does this measurement involve the volume of a goat's bladder? A quirky detail here. Some scribes used mnemonic poems to remember tax codes, like musical jingles for ancient bureaucracy. You wish you had one. You wish you had any clue at all. Your stomach growls again. The scribe hands you a piece of dried persimmon. chewy and slightly sour. It helps. You're about to thank him when your sleeve catches on the inkwell and sends it crashing to the floor. There is a silence so deep it echoes. You begin apologizing in every language you know. He waves you off, picks up the pieces, and mutters something about the fragility of ink and foreigners. You are demoted again to sweeping. You grab a broom made of stiff reeds and begin sweeping the stone floor, which you now realize is coated in centuries of scribe dust. You sneeze, loudly. Inked bamboo slips flutter off the desk like panicked butterflies. At this point, the scribe just laughs. It's a wheezy sound, old and tired, but genuine. He waves you outside and tells you you've done enough, for the rest of the dynasty perhaps. You exit the pavilion, blinking in the sunlight, coated in ink, string fragments, and what may be antique mildew. A child points and says, "It's the funny ink ghost." You bow. The child bows. You're getting better at this. Still, you're left wondering how anyone survived a day like this without collapsing into a heap of rice wine and tears. The afternoon sun is high now, casting sharp shadows across the village. You sit under the same tree as before, letting your back rest against the trunk. It's not comfortable, but it's real. You close your eyes for just a moment. That's when a rooster hops onto your lap. You open your eyes to its beady, judgmental stare. This is your life now. This apparently is the price of historical immersion. Just as the rooster is getting comfortable on your lap, possibly preparing to lay an egg on sheer principle, you're summoned again, this time by a teenage boy carrying a hoe and looking distressingly enthusiastic. You are, it turns out, today's lucky helper in the rice paddies. You rise slowly, your robe sticking to you like a damp curtain, and follow him past the village boundary, where the earth flattens into a checkerboard of narrow, waterlogged plots. The smell hits you first, muddy, green, and faintly sulphurous. Then the sound, a soft squelch with every step, frogs croaking like they're judging you. As you wade into the shallow water, your wooden sandals suction themselves to the muck with a wet pop. After 2 steps, one is gone, swallowed whole by the paddy. You consider going back for it. You do not. The boy laughs and hands you a straw hat instead. It's too large and flops down over your eyes like a wilted pancake. Your task is simple: remove weeds. Except the weeds look identical to the rice plants, and the water obscures everything. You try to mimic the others: stooped posture, quick motions, rhythmically flicking unwanted sprouts into baskets. But your version resembles someone trying to charm snakes while losing a slow battle against gravity. You slip twice. The second time you fall fully forward, arms submerged, face an inch from a frog. The frog does not move. The frog is not impressed. Rice farming in ancient China was backbreaking, muddy, and absolutely vital. A mainstream historical fact. During the Han Dynasty, rice became the staple crop in the south, with irrigation systems so advanced they astonished later engineers. You, however, are just astonished your remaining sandal is still on. Historians still argue whether peasants found satisfaction in the communal nature of agricultural work, or merely endured it because there was no other option. Right now, you'd settle for a dry pair of socks and a chiropractic session. Hours pass. The sun climbs. Your hat offers only psychological shade. Your lower back begins muttering curses in languages you don't speak. And then, like a vision, a farmer appears with a water gourd. You drink. It's warm, slightly murky, but glorious. You almost weep. A fringe tidbit. In some rural areas, farmers believe talking too much while planting rice would offend the field spirits. You haven't talked in hours, which means the spirits are probably delighted. Your back, however, is preparing a strongly worded letter. Lunch comes late and is eaten squatting in the shade of a bamboo grove. Cold millet, a slice of pickled turnip, and mysteriously, a boiled egg dyed grey from overcooking. You chew mechanically, too tired to protest. The teen farmer offers you a piece of dried bean curd. You accept. It has the texture of burlap and the taste of history. After lunch, someone hands you the reins of an ox. You assume this is symbolic. It is not. You are expected to guide this hulking beast through a muddy row, while someone behind you tills the soil. The ox regards you with mild disdain and begins walking, slowly, inexorably, into the wrong row. You tug gently. It ignores you. You tug harder. It farts. You accept your fate. Eventually, an older farmer intervenes, whistling a series of notes that miraculously steer the ox into the proper furrow. He pats the animal like an old friend and hands you a bamboo rake instead. This goes marginally better until you rake over a crab. The crab is not amused. Later, you help transplant rice, seedlings, gently pressing each green shoot into the ooze. It's repetitive, meditative, oddly soothing, until your leg cramps and you pitch forward again. This time, face first. You rise with a single rice shoot stuck to your forehead. No one laughs. They've seen worse. The sun begins to sink. A bell rings somewhere back in the village. You exhale, unsure if the relief is physical or existential. The farmers begin packing tools, and you limp behind them, coated in mud, hair plastered to your face, and one sandal short of a footwear crisis. As you return, the villagers nod at you, not unkindly. You suspect you've earned a modicum of respect or pity. At this point, you'll take either. At the threshold of the house, the rooster is waiting, still judging. You're not even fully inside the house when someone claps you on the back and chirps something about tea time. Tea sounds great. It sounds civilized. It sounds like you'll be sitting down and not being pecked by insects or oxen. You follow your host, who, after a full day in the sun, still somehow looks less disheveled than you did at breakfast, into a neighbor's courtyard. There, beneath a blooming pomegranate tree and a large woven awning, sits a low table, already set with a small clay kettle, delicate cups, and a tray of pickled snacks that look suspiciously like tree bark. This isn't a casual tea break. This is a ceremony, and you are wildly unprepared. The tea is served by a man with precisely trimmed facial hair and a robe so crisply folded it might have been pressed by the gods. His movements are slow, exact, and totally silent. He pours hot water over the tea leaves, then discards that first steep into a bowl for washing the cups. You try to copy the respectful posture of the others around you, but your knee gives a dramatic creak and your stomach audibly growls. The tea, finally served in a cup so tiny it could be swallowed by a thimble, is warm, earthy, and unexpectedly calming. You sip. Everyone nods. You nod too. Then you immediately slurp it loudly. Everyone stops nodding. A mainstream historical fact. Tea drinking in ancient China was as much about aesthetics and ritual as taste. During the Tang and Song dynasties, tea culture flourished among elites, with detailed etiquette manuals outlining every step from water temperature to cup handling. You, of course, have violated most of them in under 10 seconds. Historians still argue whether tea ceremonies were as common among villagers as among scholars, but clearly this community takes its brewing very seriously. The host refills your cup without a word, but this time with a look that says, "Try slurping again and see what happens." A fringe tidbit floats to your memory. Some nobles once added onion or ginger to their tea for medicinal effect. You glance at the steaming pot and wonder if that's why your sinuses are suddenly clearing. Conversation around the table begins, soft, rhythmic, and filled with long pauses. Someone quotes a poem about falling leaves. Another replies with a reference to plum blossoms enduring frost. You nod as though you understand, but you're mentally compiling a list of modern comforts you'd trade for an air-conditioned room and a firm mattress. The neighbor's eldest son begins discussing the latest town gossip. A minor official in the next village over has been reassigned for insufficient filial piety. You pretend to sip and gasp at the right moment. This is clearly shocking news. You do not know why. Then, disaster. You reach for a small saucer of pickled plum slices, thinking it will balance out the bitterness of the tea. Instead, your sleeve knocks over a porcelain cup. It falls in slow motion, shatters. The sound is surprisingly musical. You freeze. Everyone looks at the host looks at you. There is a pause. Then, blessedly, he lets out a short, sharp laugh. Another guest joins in. The tension melts. Someone makes a joke about spirits breaking, cups to bless the gathering. You laugh too hard. You stop laughing, a fresh cup is brought out. You are forgiven, but you now sip with the caution of someone handling nitroglycerin. The ceremony ends just as the sun begins its descent. The light filtering through the pomegranate branches paints everyone in a gentle red glow. For a moment, everything is soft, slow, and beautiful. Even you, sitting muddy, sore, and holding a cup of tea like it's the last civilized object in the world. As people stand and bow in thanks, you scramble to copy them. Your bow is too fast, your robe snags on the table, and you almost topple into a tray of dried lotus seeds. A nearby child catches the tray just in time. They are your hero now. You shuffle back to the main road with your host, the taste of bitter tea still on your tongue and the faint scent of incense clinging to your robe. You've survived your first ancient tea ceremony, just barely. At the threshold of the house, you pause. The rooster is still there. It blinks slowly. It knows. You've barely made it back from your tea-induced humiliation when a distant sound grabs your attention. A low, rumbling rattle, like thunder wrapped in leather. People begin stepping aside, children are ushered off the path, and a line of dust rises on the horizon. A caravan is coming, and it is not slowing down. Before you can process this, a young man grabs your sleeve and yanks you out of the road. Just in time, because a camel, yes, a camel, clomps past you with a look that says it has seen things. Behind it, an ox-drawn cart piled high with bolts of silk, glazed pottery, and what might be dried sea cucumbers rumbles by, followed by another camel, several men in sun-bleached tunics, and one goose who appears to have joined the procession. By accident, this is the Silk Road, baby, or at least one of its provincial arteries. And you are about 3 steps from becoming a cautionary tale about inattentive pedestrians. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient China's trade routes were among the most sophisticated in the pre-modern world. These caravans connected not just cities, but entire civilizations, India, Persia, even the Roman Empire, all linked by the exchange of silk, spices, tea, and the occasional very confused goat. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road's cultural exchange was more significant than its economic one. Either way, right now it's mostly an excuse for you to be yelled at in 3 dialects for standing where goods need to be hauled. A merchant, sunburned and bearded, gestures for help with a crate. You try to lift it. You fail. You try again. Your back makes a noise like someone snapping wet twigs. He laughs and hands you a smaller parcel, a tightly bound roll of cloth, stamped with a seal you can't read. You nod solemnly, as if you've carried sealed bolts of brocade your whole life. You help carry things from the road to a nearby warehouse, a wide, open-walled structure with thatched roofing and organized chaos inside. Crates are being opened, goods recorded on bamboo slips, and a man is shouting numbers while chewing something that smells like fermented garlic. Someone points to a bronze scale. Your motion to place the goods on one side while a stack of weights is arranged on the other. It tips immediately. Everyone groans. You've clearly insulted the scale. You try again. Slower this time. The weights balance. A minor cheer erupts. You've done something right. You feel the kind of pride usually reserved for passing an exam or fixing a leaky faucet. As you help arrange the bundles, you notice just how diverse this little economic node is. There's a Persian with a scarlet sash speaking halting Chinese. A man from the southern seas with ebony beads woven into his beard. A local woman fiercely negotiating the price of cinnamon bark, like she's storming a fortress with math. A quirky tidbit. Chinese officials sometimes placed incense sticks in contract boxes. If the deal wasn't settled before the stick burned, down, negotiations had to end. You briefly wish someone had done that with your tea ceremony. Someone hands you a rice ball wrapped in lotus leaf. You devour it. It tastes like reward, and possibly peanut. You're given a break, allowed to sit on a low bench while the caravan prepares to move on. The animals are being fed, camels with bundles of hay, horses with troughs of water, and that goose, still here, still angry, as the sun begins its descent. Shadows stretch long across the ground, and the caravan starts to reorganize. A bell chimes. Drivers shout commands. Wheels creak. Hooves strike rhythm. Dust swirls. It's beautiful, in a chaotic, grimy, slightly sneezy way. You step aside as the caravan rolls past once more, this time more slowly, and someone tosses you a piece of dried persimmon. A thank you, or a hint to eat less and lift more, you're not sure. Then it's gone. Camels fading into the road haze, wheels creaking into distance, and a quiet falling over the village again. You realize just how much movement and trade kept this world alive. No one here makes or grows everything they need, not even close. Even in a society famous for self-reliance and ancestor worship, the web of trade is tight. You just helped move a tiny knot in that web. You walk back toward the house. Your arms ache. Your robes are even dustier than before. You still only have one sandal. At the gate, the rooster has been replaced by a sleepy dog. It lifts its head, sniffs you, and goes back to sleep. Progress. You finally make it to the edge of the courtyard, intent on collapsing quietly into a straw mat and pretending to be invisible for the next 3 hours. But rest will have to wait, because a stooped, elderly woman in 5 overlapping tunics gestures for you to follow her. She smells like camphor, star anise, and moral authority. You trail behind her to a smaller building near the edge of the village. Its door is made of rough-cut wood, adorned with faded charms painted in what looks like ox blood. Inside is a low table cluttered with dried herbs, animal bones, small pots of unidentifiable paste, and a dried lizard nailed to the wall for reasons you don't ask about. You are in the domain of the village healer. You will not be leaving unchanged. She points to your lower back, then makes a noise that sounds halfway between a cough and a cackle. Apparently, your posture has offended several generations of your ancestors. You are told to sit. You sit. She prods your spine with 2 fingers that feel like dried twigs and makes a low sound of concern. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Chinese medicine relied heavily on theories of energy flow, qi, as well as the balance of yin and yang. Illness wasn't just about the body, but about imbalance, climate, food, and moral failings. Based on your condition, you've committed at least 6 energetic crimes. She pulls out a paper sachet and empties the contents into a tiny bronze kettle. Dried chrysanthemum, slices of ginger, something that smells like stale socks, and a powder that makes your nose itch. She brews this mixture with the gravity of a potion master. The resulting tea is hot, yellowish, and tastes like someone made soup out of bark, an unresolved family drama. You drink. She watches. Then comes the deer antler dust. Yes, real deer antler, ground into powder, mixed with rice wine, and rubbed vigorously into your lower back with what may be a peach pit. You wince. She nods approvingly. A quirky tidbit. Powdered deer antler was believed to restore virility, strength, and even longevity. At the very least, it makes your spine tingle like someone's performing acupuncture with static electricity. Next, she brings out the mushrooms. Not for eating. No, these are for boiling. She adds them to a ceramic bowl filled with broth and instructs you to hold your face over the steam. Your eyes water. Your pores open. You begin to hallucinate the scent of a damp forest floor mixed with regret. Historians still argue whether early Chinese medicine was primarily empirical or symbolic. Some say its herbal prescriptions evolved from generations of observation. Others believe the symbolism of ingredients mattered just as much. Antlers for strength, ginseng for spirit, tiger bone for courage. You feel none of these things. You feel warm and confused. Suddenly, she claps her hands. Time for cupping. Bowls are heated with small flames, then placed along your back with swift, practiced motions. They suck against your skin with startling force. You look like you're being attacked by polite jellyfish. The sensation is odd, part pressure, part heat, part disconcerting pop. She leaves you there, face down, while humming something mournful and rearranging dried geckos on her shelf. You wonder if this is a lullaby or a warning. Eventually, she removes the cups, clucks disapprovingly at the red circles now dotting your skin, and wraps you in a piece of cloth that smells like wintergreen and medicinal authority. You are handed another tea, this one darker, more bitter, somehow angrier. You drink anyway. As she prepares a final poultice, you notice a scroll pinned to the wall. A hand-painted diagram of the human body with inked pathways winding like rivers across the limbs and torso. These are meridians, believed to be the channels through which qi flows. Yours apparently resemble a clogged canal system. You're given a small sachet of herbs to boil at home and strict instructions not to eat melon or garlic for 3 days. You agree, though you don't understand. Agreement is the only safe path forward. You bow deeply. She bows deeper. You manage to stop after the third bow this time. Progress. As you leave, she waves you off with a smile and a muttered charm. You feel lighter. Your back still hurts, but now it feels purposeful, like it's healing from emotional damage incurred by a past life. The sun is dipping low now, casting long shadows over the fields. Smoke curls from cooking fires. Somewhere, a flute plays a minor, reedy tune. You limp slightly, not because you're injured, but because it somehow feels appropriate. You pass a group of children laughing and chasing each other with sticks. One stops, sniffs the air and says, "Medicine ghost." You bow solemnly. He bows back, then runs. You're halfway to the house when you realize you actually do feel better. Or maybe you're just exhausted enough not to care anymore. Either way, you're ready for anything, except of course, what's coming next. What's coming? You return to the courtyard with a small cloud of mushroom steam, still clinging to your face, and faint circular welts dotting your back like a constellation of poor life choices. You expect, perhaps, to be allowed a brief nap, a little lie down, a moment to ponder the mystery of deer antlers as medicine. But no, instead you are informed that it's rest time, which sounds promising, until you realize that rest in this context doesn't mean a nap. It means everyone else gets one, and you get to lie very still and not disrupt the delicate balance of the household's yin energy. You're shown to a small, tidy room, its air perfumed faintly with dried orange peel and cedar. A mat is rolled out for you, and you are encouraged to lie down and be silent. A cat watches from the windowsill with profound disappointment. You lower yourself gently, limbs crackling, and arrange your aching body on the mat like a tired centipede. The room is dim, warm, and peaceful. You might even fall asleep. That is, until you start sneezing. Because hanging from the rafters, just above your head, is a bundle of herbs, and one of them is absolutely at war with your sinuses. You suppress the sneeze. You fail. It comes out in a loud, involuntary chew and echoes slightly. A baby cries somewhere in the house. You hear footsteps. The door opens just a crack. A pair of eyes glare in, assessing your sneeze's alignment with local custom. They close the door without a word. You failed nap etiquette. A mainstream historical fact. In many parts of ancient China, the midday rest, or wujiao, was deeply ingrained, even institutionalized. Markets closed, officials paused their duties, and the whole town went into a sort of respectful energy conservation mode. It wasn't laziness, it was rhythm, harmony, strategic power down. Historians still argue whether this cultural siesta had more to do with Confucian ideals of balanced living or just pragmatic heat avoidance in an era without ceiling fans. Either way, you are not adapting well. You do eventually drift off, sort of. Eyes half open, mind wandering, body twitching every time a cricket chirps too loudly. And they chirp constantly. It's like a tiny, shrill orchestra in every direction. You dream, briefly, of the ox judging you, wearing your sandal. You wake up to the sensation of something cold and wet on your neck. You jerk upright and find a cloth placed there by a well-meaning auntie figure who has long since left. You're sweaty, confused, and partially blind from the sunlight now slanting directly into your eyes. Then, things get weird. A man enters, sets down a low stool beside you, and gestures for you to sit up and expose your back. You obey. He pulls out a small brass bowl filled with warm oil and what appears to be a turtle shell. He's here for gua sha, a quirky fringe practice that's actually still around today. Gua sha involves scraping the skin to encourage blood flow and balance internal heat. To you, it feels like someone attempting to erase your shoulder blades using a decorative spoon. The scraping begins. It's rhythmic, purposeful, slightly alarming. After a few minutes, your skin feels like it's been both exfoliated and reprimanded. You're told your wind heat has been expelled. You smile politely, though you're unsure if wind heat was something you wanted to keep. You're allowed to rest again. You choose a corner this time, cooler, farther from the sneezy herbs, and slightly closer to the door in case another turtle shell-bearing gentleman arrives. Outside, the world begins to hum back to life. Voices rise again. Pots clatter. A rooster makes its 15th comment of the day. Someone plays a string instrument badly, but with conviction. You rise, robe slightly crumpled, skin tingling, and step back into the daylight. And then your nose starts bleeding. Of course it does. The air is dry. The tea was spicy. The scraping vigorous. A young girl hands you a scrap of linen and says something kind in a dialect you don't understand. You smile, pinch your nose, and try not to look like a doomed poet. Historians might argue whether ancient villagers viewed nosebleeds as signs of overexertion or spiritual imbalance. You, however, are fairly confident this one came from stress, lack of air conditioning, and residual trauma from being cupped by a peach pit. You're ushered back toward the center of the house for the next ritual of the day, and though you beg, silently for mercy, it seems rest time is well and truly over, because now it's time for school. You are led to what appears to be a modest wooden structure, half home, half classroom, fully terrifying. A faded scroll hangs above the doorway with brushstrokes so authoritative you feel guilty for not understanding them. Inside, there are low benches, straw mats, and one small boy already weeping quietly into a bamboo tablet. Welcome to ancient Chinese school. You sit cross-legged beside a group of students ranging from about 6 to perhaps 12 years old. All of them wear expressions somewhere between grim focus and quiet dread. The instructor, an elderly man with a face like folded parchment and eyebrows that belong in a museum, enters with the kind of silence that demands reverence. Everyone straightens. You try. Your knees crack loudly. A mainstream historical fact, in many dynasties, especially under Confucian influence, education was the path to upward mobility. The imperial examination system, which began in earnest during the Sui dynasty, meant even peasants' children had a theoretical shot at high office. If they could memorize thousands of classical texts without going mad, you, however, cannot. Even remember what century it is. The lesson begins with chanting. The children recite the 3-character classic, a Confucian primer, written entirely in 3-syllable lines. You do your best to mumble along, but your pronunciation is somewhere between tragic and illegal. The boy beside you leans over and helpfully whispers, That's the line about respecting your elders. You said something about hugging a goose. The teacher gives you a look. You smile. The smile is not returned. You're handed a brush and a sheet of rough paper. The brush, as always, is trickier than it looks. Your first character is wobbly. Your second is worse. The third appears to insult the emperor's shoes. The instructor breathes in deeply and places a pebble on your hand to stabilize your strokes. You do marginally better. The pebble is now your co-teacher. After calligraphy practice, it's time for moral instruction. The teacher unrolls a scroll depicting the 24 filial exemplars, a collection of morality tales meant to instill Confucian virtue. The first story involves a man lying shirtless on ice to catch fish for his sick stepmother. You shift uncomfortably. The second story features a boy who lets mosquitoes bite him instead of his parents. You begin to sweat. The third story stars a man who cries loudly until bamboo sprouts from frozen soil. You pretend to be deeply moved, but the boy beside you mutters, "That one's fake." You nod solemnly. Historians still debate whether these morality tales were ever widely practiced or simply aspirational propaganda. Either way, your own filial piety is starting to look deeply undercooked. Now comes the real test: recitation. The teacher points at you. You freeze. He quotes a line from the Analects, something about ritual and benevolence. You scramble mentally, searching for a response, a matching line, a distant memory from an ancient philosophy podcast. All you can recall is Confucius says something, probably polite. You mumble an apology. He sighs. You are assigned to quiet corner with 2 children who have been caught drawing cats on their bamboo slips. You immediately draw a cat. One of the other students begins reading aloud from the Book of Songs, the Shi Jing, the oldest anthology of Chinese poetry filled with verses about farming, love, and seasonal suffering. The boy's voice rises and falls like a mournful flute. It's beautiful. It's rhythmic. It makes your eyes water. Or maybe that's the ink fumes. You're invited to try. You read a short poem about plum blossoms falling in winter. The room is silent. The teacher nods, then adds, "That one's usually sung." Everyone snickers. As the lesson winds down, the children gather to bow in thanks. You copy them, trying not to overdo it. You've bowed so much today, your vertebrae are considering unionizing. As you file out, the teacher presses a rice cracker into your hand. It's dry, crumbly, and a bit sweet. He says, "For effort." You say thank you. He replies, "Pronunciation still terrible." Fair. Outside, the sun has sunk lower, tinting everything gold. You blink at the light, surprised at how the afternoon has slipped by, swallowed by characters and tales and very specific definitions of respect. A quirky tidbit. In some elite schools during the Song dynasty, students were so dedicated to memorizing texts that they tied their hair to ceilings to stay upright while studying. You briefly consider this, decide against it. You're walking back toward the house when the smallest student catches up to you, offers a small drawing of what appears to be you fighting a goose, and runs away giggling. You tuck it into your robe. A souvenir. You may have failed as a scholar, but you've succeeded as a schoolyard legend. You're just starting to believe you've survived the hardest parts of the day. Your back's been cupped, your brain grilled, and your spirit gently bruised by poetry recitals when you are suddenly invited to attend a small evening gathering. A neighbor's grandfather has returned from a short pilgrimage, and the household is honoring him with a simple meal and formal greetings. This sounds innocent enough. It is not. What no one tells you is that in ancient China, greetings are a battlefield, and you are about to step onto it with a wet sponge for a sword. The courtyard is lit with paper lanterns, casting warm, flickering light over everything. You follow your host through the open wooden gate, where an impressive group of relatives has already assembled. Men in stiff robes, women with intricately braided hair, and children who have clearly been briefed on exactly how disappointing you are. At the center, seated on a carved wooden chair with the posture of someone who once scolded a magistrate into tears, is the grandfather. He regards you with calm detachment, like a turtle deciding whether you're worth snapping at. Your host bows, everyone bows, deeply, elegantly, in sequence. You bow too fast, too low, and worst of all, at the wrong angle. There's a brief silence, like the universe itself has winced. A mainstream historical fact. In ancient China, the type, depth, and timing of your bow could signal everything from "I respect you deeply" to "I am challenging your legitimacy as a landowner." The standing bow, the kneeling bow, the double kneel with forehead to ground, each had its place. And you just delivered what can only be described as the "oops, I dropped my soup" variation. Historians still argue whether etiquette manuals were strictly followed or merely aspirational in daily life. Judging by the aunt in the corner who just dropped her fan in horror, this village leans traditional. You try to recover by offering a small gift, a leaf you folded into something vaguely bird-shaped. You thought it was charming. The grandfather examines it, then nods with what might be approval, or might be indigestion. You're then seated near the outer edge of the gathering, politely sidelined but still within polite visibility. Which is code for, we're not mad, just profoundly uncertain. The meal begins. You're served first, an honor. You panic and start eating immediately, a mistake. Others hadn't lifted their chopsticks yet. A few guests glance your way. One child gasps. You set your chopsticks down like they're radioactive. Soon, everyone else starts eating and conversation resumes. Sort of. People speak in poetic metaphors, tangents about river reeds and filial dew, and the occasional parable that might actually be about someone in the room. You smile and nod like a puppet slowly realizing it's in a foreign play. You're offered wine. It's served warm, in a tiny porcelain cup. You lift it with both hands, bow slightly, and sip. Finally, something you don't mess up. It tastes like fire wrapped in dried fruit. You cough once, then nod solemnly. Someone chuckles. You are beginning to recover some face, and then you stand up. Another mistake. You thought it polite. It is, in fact, not the right moment. The grandfather is still speaking, a slow reminiscence about cloud formations he saw near a monastery. You sit back down. A woman whispers something to her child, and they both glance at your knees. A fringe tidbit. In some dynasties, formal dinners required guests to keep their knees covered, their hands visible, and their chewing silent. You have broken all three rules before the soup arrives. Eventually, the host rises and leads the final toasts. You are spared further performance. People start dispersing. The children are sent to bed. The lanterns flicker as night deepens. You make your way to the grandfather once more, offering a final practice bow. This one not too low, not too fast. The old man eyes you and nods. One deliberate nod. Victory. You leave the courtyard filled with equal parts shame and relief. You may not have honored every code, but you didn't dishonor them all. Progress. You step out into the cool night air, heart still thumping from the social obstacle course you just flailed through. Stars blink above you. A breeze stirs the paper, charms hanging from nearby trees. It's peaceful now, until a rooster crows. At night. You turn slowly. The rooster is standing on a wall, watching. You wake up sometime after midnight with an urgent, undeniable sensation deep in your gut. Betrayal. Something you ate earlier. Maybe the mystery duck foot, maybe the pickled bark, maybe that leaf you mistook for garnish, is staging an organized revolt. Your insides are now in heated debate, and you are the moderator without a gavel. You sit up in the dark, the woven mat crackling beneath you, and fumble for your sandals. You only find one. No time. You limp through the quiet house with the grace of a panicked cabbage. Outdoors, the village is wrapped in silence, save for the wind whispering through bamboo groves and the occasional snore from a distant neighbor. You follow the same winding path to the latrine that traumatized you that morning. You remember it well. You've seen it in your dreams. The pit toilet awaits, unchanged. You brace yourself. Let's skip a few details here. Suffice it to say, your body has decided to punish you for daring to think you could digest a century's worth of culinary evolution in a single day. Mainstream historical fact: food safety in ancient times relied heavily on fermentation, drying, and prayers to the kitchen god. The absence of refrigeration meant strong stomachs weren't just an asset, they were a survival trait. You, it appears, are lacking in this particular form of ancestral strength. As you stagger out of the shed, paler, lighter, and spiritually broken, you spot movement in the shadows. A figure approaches, an elderly woman in a nightrobe, holding a small lamp. It's your host's grandmother, and she knows. Without a word, she hands you a small pouch containing ground charcoal and rice flour and a cup of room temperature tea that smells faintly of licorice and despair. You sip it obediently. It tastes like mud filtered through kindness. It helps. She pats your shoulder, chuckles softly, and disappears into the dark like some benevolent ghost of indigestion past. You return to your mat, exhausted, stomach still whispering threats. You close your eyes, willing sleep to return. It does not. Instead, you are serenaded by the late-night noises of an ancient village. A dog barks in the distance. A frog croaks rhythmically, possibly to mock you. The wind rattles dried gourds hanging from a porch like makeshift wind chimes. You try to relax. You try not to think about whether the latrine ghosts hold grudges. And then comes the food. Again. Only, this time, it's different. You are roused at dawn for a kind of thank you breakfast. Apparently, word of your participation in last night's formal greeting spread through the neighborhood. You've earned points for effort, if not style, and you're invited to dine with the extended family. You shuffle toward the communal table like a man approaching his final exam. The spread is humble but varied. Rice porridge topped with preserved vegetables, slivers of dried tofu, boiled peanuts, and, most importantly, something you recognize. Pancakes. Well, sort of. These are scallion pancakes. Thin, crispy, salty, discs fried in sesame oil and stacked like edible parchment. You nearly weep with relief. You chew cautiously, watching for surprise flavors, and find them miraculously pleasant. No hidden fish paste, no numbing spices, just scallions and salvation. You're offered soup next, milky broth with soft rice noodles and a hint of ginger. A child proudly presents you with a pickled plum. You eat it. You flinch. She laughs and calls you pickle face. You accept the title with grace. A quirky tidbit. Pickled plums, or swanmei, were believed to stimulate digestion, cool the body, and even ward off certain evils. You are currently hoping they also banish food flashbacks. You finish your bowl with decorum. You remember to hold your chopsticks properly, to place them horizontally on the bowl afterward, and not to leave them sticking up, because in ancient China, that's an offering for the dead. You already look half dead. Best not to invite more confusion. Your host's aunt smiles at you with a look of cautious approval. The rooster, miraculously absent from the morning festivities, has presumably retired for the day. You miss him a little, not emotionally, just for the sheer consistency of his judgment. As the breakfast wraps up, someone announces that today is market day in the neighboring village. You do not volunteer to go. You do not move. Instead, you sit in the rising sunlight, sipping a third cup of mild tea, finally warm, full, but not dangerously so, and beginning to understand what survival means here. It's not just getting through, the meals or the mud or the bowing. It's learning how to be quiet in the rhythm of someone else's world, to bow at the right time, to eat slowly, to accept strange herbs with grace, And above all, to never, ever assume that the meat in the stew is what you think it is. After your modest triumph at breakfast and an hour of sitting very still, partly in reflection, partly because you're afraid moving too much might reactivate the plum, you're encouraged to take a walk. Stretch the chi, someone says, motioning vaguely to your limbs, which by now feel like wet noodles glued to your bones. You oblige, because saying no in ancient China feels culturally dangerous. You're handed a bamboo walking stick, mostly symbolic, though you're grateful, for the extra stability and guided toward a slope at the edge of the village. A few others accompany you. A teenage boy, a woman with a basket of firewood, and a dog who may or may not belong to anyone. The climb isn't steep, but the air gets thinner. Soon, the village is below you, a neat cluster of thatched rooftops and smoke tendrils rising from cookfires. You can see the entire patchwork of rice fields now, glistening in the morning sun like watery mirrors. It's quiet here, peaceful in a way that doesn't quite exist in the modern world. You stop under a tree, an ancient stooped thing wrapped in red prayer ribbons, and you sit. No one speaks. Even the teenage boy, normally bubbling with snark, remains silent. It feels like a sacred pause, and then you smell it. Smoke, the strong, throat-tickling kind. You turn and spot a man walking along the path below, hauling a bundle of charcoal in a bamboo cart. The smell intensifies as he passes. It lingers in the air long after he's gone, settling into your robes, your nose, your soul. A mainstream historical fact. Much of ancient China's cooking, heating, and metalwork depended on wood and charcoal. The towns and villages often wore a soft veil of soot that clung to walls, clothes, lungs. During colder months, entire courtyards might fill with low-lying smoke from countless clay stoves. Cozy, yes, but not great for asthmatics. Historians still argue whether air quality was a known issue at the time, or if it simply wasn't noticed amidst more immediate dangers like bandits and runaway pigs. Regardless, you now understand why so many poetic laments include lines about the heaviness of dusk or the choking sigh of twilight. Back in the village, the street has transformed. Lanterns are being lit early today, possibly in preparation for an upcoming festival. Their golden light flickers softly against soot-covered beams and faded red charms pasted on doorways. Everything looks old and loved and very slightly on fire. Someone hands you a rag. You instinctively begin dusting yourself off until you realize they meant for you to help polish the lanterns. You nod, as if you knew that all along. Cleaning the lanterns is oddly satisfying. You rub soot away to reveal carved designs. Cranes, lotuses, a cheerful-looking turtle holding a coin. You feel for a fleeting moment useful. Then, as the sun continues to fall, you're invited to bathe. Finally, a bath. Civilization. A chance to remove 17 layers of grime and medicinal, mushroom residue. You're led to the communal bathhouse on the far side of the village, a long, low building built over a hot spring-fed pool. The entrance is simple, but guarded by a stern-looking boy who collects your robe and gives you a thin cotton towel in exchange. A small one. A very small one. Inside, steam swirls over stone tiles. The room is dimly lit by oil lamps that flicker and sputter. Other villagers sit silently in the water, shoulders submerged, eyes half closed, as if marinating in existential wisdom. You tiptoe in, trying not to slip or make a splash. The water is hot, deliciously so. Every ache, every indignity, every rooster-related trauma begins to melt from your bones. You lean back, floating gently, finally relaxing. That's when you break a rule. You start humming. Just a little, a peaceful tune, a reflex. Everyone looks at you. You stop humming. Bathhouses, it turns out, are places of sacred silence. Talking is rare, singing is forbidden, splashing is a crime punishable by prolonged awkwardness. You shrink lower in the water until only your nose and eyes are visible. A quirky tidbit. Some bathhouses in ancient China used bundles of medicinal herbs, mugwort, ginger, cinnamon bark, placed in the hot water to release heat and clear the wind. You spot one such bundle floating nearby. You nudge it gently, as though that might grant you forgiveness. After some time, you dry off and dress, robe slightly less dusty than before, spirit slightly less bruised. You feel reborn, until you realize your hair is sticking straight up from the steam and no one told you. Outside, the village glows gently under the rising moon. The air still carries smoke, but now it's softened by the scent of pine and warm broth. You pass neighbors walking slowly, children chasing shadows, a man carrying a lantern shaped like a rabbit. You return to the house feeling clean, not just physically, but contextually. You may still be a bumbling outsider with questionable bowing skills and an unfortunate history with soup, but you're learning. And for the first time all day, the rooster is not at the gate. Perhaps it is sleeping, or perhaps it is planning. The moon hangs high now, silver and round, casting pale light across the village rooftops. Shadows stretch long and gentle, and the world has slowed into that deep, sleepy rhythm only ancient places seem to remember. You think, maybe, just maybe, you'll get to drift quietly towards sleep, but the paper lanterns bobbing along the main road suggest otherwise. Your host hands you a small bundle and points to the square. You follow, bundle in hand, wondering what part of survival this is. Is it another ceremony, a ghost, an after-dinner tax audit? As it turns out, it's the Zhongyuan festival, the Hungry Ghost Festival, which you learn when someone lights incense, starts humming in a minor key, and begins setting out bowls of rice for the dead. You clutch your bundle tightly. A mainstream historical fact. The 7th lunar month in China is known as Ghost Month, a time when it's believed the spirits of the deceased return to visit the living. People make offerings, burn joss paper, and leave out food, because nobody wants to be haunted by a hungry uncle with unfinished business and a grudge against modern cutlery. Historians still argue whether the Hungry Ghost Festival began purely as Buddhist ritual or as a mashup of older folk beliefs with Confucian ancestor reverence. Tonight, it doesn't matter. The entire village is treating this with the kind of quiet seriousness usually reserved for exams or rice harvests. You sit on a low stool in the square. People move around you, some lighting incense, others placing bowls carefully along the path. Small paper boats float in water basins, each holding a flickering candle meant to guide lost souls back to peace. You find this beautiful until a child sneezes, blows one out, and is swiftly scolded by 5 aunties in chorus. Then comes the paper. Bundles of joss paper, called hell money in modern parlance, are handed out. You're told to burn it carefully and not to toss it haphazardly or, heaven forbid, fold it the wrong way. You are not entirely sure how one folds pretend money for spirits, but you copy your neighbors, who fold each sheet into a loose ingot and place it reverently into the flames. The fire crackles. Sparks drift into the night sky. You feel connected. Not to ghosts necessarily, but to the rhythm of it all, the shared hush, the reverence, the old stories wrapped in firelight. You remember the bundle in your hands. You open it. It's a small offering. 2 steamed buns, a pinch of salt, dried apple slices. Someone gently guides you to place it at the foot of a tree where others have already laid fruit, meat, and, curiously, one perfectly preserved chicken foot. You hesitate, then set your bundle down with as much sincerity as you can muster. A breeze stirs the leaves. A lantern flickers. You try not to imagine anything watching. A quirky tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that the dead might show approval of an offering by appearing in dreams. You silently request that any such visitation be polite, brief, and non-violent. After the offerings come the tales. People gather in small clusters. Old men light their pipes. Children press close to grandmothers. Someone begins to recite a ghost story, softly, rhythmically, like a lullaby made of warnings. You catch only pieces. A girl who wandered too far on ghost night and returned with white hair. A man who refused to bow to a roadside shrine and woke up with a frog in his throat. Literally, the stories aren't meant to terrify. They're meant to remind. Remember the spirits. Honor the ancestors. Don't finish the pickled plums in one sitting. You join a group seated on mats, and a middle-aged woman with a lantern-shaped birthmark tells the tale of a lost soul who found peace only when someone lit incense for them on a night just like this. Everyone listens quietly. A dog sighs. You don't know if you believe in ghosts, but you do believe in ritual, in the way people lean into it, eager for structure, for meaning, for the comfort of doing something ancient and shared. You offer one more folded joss paper into the fire. It catches quickly, curling into golden ash. You whisper something, nothing dramatic, just a quiet, uncertain thank you. To the spirits, to the villagers, maybe to the rooster. And then, as if on cue, a flute begins to play, not well, not badly, but not tunefully. It's a reedy, nasal melody, played by someone with more spirit than precision. You glance over and see a man sitting cross-legged by the roadside, eyes closed, playing a bamboo flute with gusto and zero regard for key or tempo. It's beautiful. The fire dies down. People begin returning home. You follow, step slow, the scent of burnt paper clinging faintly to your robe. Back at the house, someone hands you a cup of warm barley tea. You sip it standing in the doorway, watching the last lanterns bob away into the night. Above you, the stars blink like joss sparks fading into darkness. Inside, your mat awaits. Your robe smells like smoke. Your fingers are stained with ash. You've survived ghost night, but tomorrow brings the night patrol. You sleep, but only barely. Your dreams are tangled things, floating lanterns, stern roosters, a turtle judging you from a bathhouse corner. And when you finally do wake, it's not to the sun, nor to a gong, nor even to the eternal judgment of poultry. It's to shouting. Sharp voices in the street. The unmistakable clack of wooden sandals on stone. And then, a low whistle, followed by the unmistakable thunk of bamboo against something soft. You peek out the window. It's the night patrol. You are, to be clear, not a criminal. Not yet. But your heart still races like you've smuggled imperial secrets in your soup. Outside, a group of men in matching tunics moves through the street with purpose. One holds a lantern shaped like a lotus flower. Another taps a bamboo pole rhythmically on the ground. A third carries what appears to be a roster of people. Residents? Suspects? You're not sure. You close the window gently, then open it again a crack, because curiosity is stronger than common sense. A mainstream historical fact. Many cities and towns in ancient China maintained night patrols, typically composed of low-ranking officials or volunteers tasked with enforcing curfews, quelling disputes, and keeping an eye out for anything suspicious, which, in your case, could be anything from sneezing too enthusiastically to wearing your robe inside out. Historians still argue whether these patrols functioned more as law enforcement or social theatre, a reminder to the townspeople that order, even after dark, was being actively maintained. Based on the current display, it's a bit of both. Then you hear it. Who goes there? You freeze. Someone has spotted movement behind a curtain, possibly yours. You duck. Smooth. Subtle. Very obvious. There's a knock on the outer gate. You are not dressed. You are, in fact, very much in your sleeping robes, which are barely suitable for sleeping, let alone confrontation with bamboo stick-wielding sentries. A member of the household calmly answers the door. You hear low conversation in formal tones. Your name is mentioned. Your terrible attempt at calligraphy is mentioned. So is the tea incident. You hear the guard chuckle. A moment later, the door closes. You exhale in one long, trembling strand of relief. You try to lie back down. The mat is warm. Your heart is not. It's still hammering a panicked rhythm. Then the dog barks. Then the rooster crows. At night, traitor, you give up and decide to sit outside. Maybe some air will help. You grab your cloak, throw it around your shoulders, and step into the night. The ba'asai. Air is crisp. Moonlight spills across rooftops. The scent of last night's incense still lingers faintly. The village has returned to stillness, but you hear the occasional bamboo knock echoing from distant alleys. A reminder. Someone is always watching. Even here, you settle on a bench under the plum tree near the shrine. A few others are already there. An old woman chewing something medicinal, a young man writing by candlelight, and the man with the off-key flute from earlier, now mercifully asleep on his instrument. You sit, you breathe, you listen. That's when someone else arrives, running, a child, breathless, wild-eyed. He whispers frantically to the old woman. She stands up, grabs a jar from her pouch and walks off without a word. The child follows. You blink. Were those spirits? Illusions? Has your tea finally fermented inside your brain? No, just real life. Someone probably has a fever, or a bad dream, or indigestion. That last one you sympathize with deeply, a quirky tidbit. Ancient Chinese night patrols sometimes carried small rattles or bells, not only to alert troublemakers, but to reassure the public of their presence. It's a strange comfort to know your quiet night isn't as unobserved as it feels. You eventually return to your room. You stretch out, watching shadows drift across the ceiling, letting your thoughts slow. But then, another noise, a clatter in the courtyard, a pot tipping over. You sit up again, and there, barely visible in the moonlight, is a figure, small, quick, darting past the laundry line. You hold your breath. Is it a ghost, a thief, a chicken? It's the goose. The same goose. The one from the market. You lock eyes. It freezes. You freeze. The tension is ancient and terrible. Then it honks once, loudly, righteously, and disappears into the shadows like a web-footed phantom. You lie back down, pillow stuffed with millet husks, the echo of that honk reverberating in your soul. Somewhere, a bamboo stick taps softly against a stone. You drift towards sleep again, finally, wondering if tomorrow will be better, or just a different flavor of bizarre. But one thing is certain, you are not alone. You awaken before the sun, not because you want to, never that, but because someone just rang a bell that sounded like it was made from the leftover parts of a siege weapon. One clang, then another, measured, solemn, and loud enough to scare the rooster into silence. You groan softly, roll onto your side, and immediately regret everything. Your back feels like it spent the night being realigned by a disapproving ghost. Your legs are stiff, your neck is sore, and your dignity has wandered off to live with the goose. Outside, the sky is just starting to lighten. Hints of lavender and orange smudge the horizon. The air is damp, earthy, and smells faintly of ash, steamed buns, and distant laundry. You dress slowly, like a reluctant museum exhibit, and make your way outside. Today's task, accompany the town's night watchmen on their final patrol of the pre-dawn hours. Why? You're not sure. Possibly because someone thought you needed more structure. Possibly because you're the only one in the village with no real skills and unlimited free time. You meet the patrol leader at the gate. He's an older man with a long silver-threaded beard, shoulders like stacked timber, and a walking staff that could double as a defensive weapon. He nods at you, not warmly, not coldly, just knowingly. Like he already suspects you'll slow him down. He hands you a small lantern. You fumble it. Off to a great start. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Chinese night patrols didn't just police the town. They were also responsible for reporting fires, checking the condition of walls and gates, and making sure no one snuck into the shrine to borrow ancestral offerings. Some were state-employed. Others were community volunteers, often working in shifts, armed with bamboo poles, rattles, and a deep-seated mistrust of late-night noodle vendors. Historians still argue whether the patrols were more symbolic than effective. But tonight, or rather, this almost morning, they are very real, and you're part of one. You trail behind as the patrol begins its circuit. The lantern you carry swings with every awkward step, casting dizzy ovals of light across the cobblestones. Your sandals slap with theatrical clarity in the silent street. Your first stop is the shrine. You bow automatically, which earns you a small approving grunt. You peek inside. The incense holders are empty but clean. A few offerings remain: dried fruit, polished stones, a tiny wooden horse that may or may not be symbolic. Nothing has been disturbed, except one thing. A jar of rice wine, previously full, is now mysteriously missing its lid. The patrol leader sniffs the air, mutters something about mischievous spirits, and replaces the cover. He doesn't look at you, but he knows. You proceed down the next lane, where the town walls loom in the dim light. Another patrolman checks the hinges of a gate, tapping each with his staff. You're handed a small wooden rattle. You're supposed to shake it in regular intervals to let people know the patrol is near. You shake it once. It sounds like two angry dice fighting in a soup can. You try again, this time with rhythm. It goes better, until you accidentally fling it into a cabbage cart. No one says anything. Someone retrieves it. You nod. They nod. The ritual is complete. You continue walking. As the stars begin to fade, a light mist settles in, wrapping the village in soft shadow. A dog trots past, ears perked, tail wagging once. You pass a sleeping merchant's stall covered in woven mats. A pair of cats perch like judgmental bookends on a windowsill. And then, just around the corner, you hear something. A soft rustle, a clink of pottery. The patrol leader freezes, raises a hand. Everyone listens. Then he moves, swiftly, silently, toward the source of the noise. You follow, less silently. Behind a large barrel, you find the culprit, a teenage boy holding a sack of stolen radishes and looking very much like he regrets everything. There's a brief exchange, firm but not unkind. The patrol leader takes the sack, scolds the boy gently, and sends him home with a tap of the staff. You're handed the sack. It's heavier than expected. You pretend it's fine. It is not. A quirky tidbit. In some towns, patrols resolved minor infractions on the spot, returning stolen goods, settling disputes with a few bamboo swats, or simply giving the offender a talking to under the watchful eye of the gods. It wasn't always legal justice, but it was order. You deliver the sack back to the owner, who offers you a turnip as a thank you. You accept, because you're now developing a small shrine of vegetables in your room. The patrol ends just as the first golden beams of sunlight hit the village rooftops. You stand with the others at the east gate, watching the light spill over, the fields like warm water. The mist lifts. The rooster, finally recovered, crows from somewhere off screen. The patrol leader turns to you and bows slightly. You bow back. Correct depth. Correct speed. He hands you a small token, a carved charm, shaped like a fish. For protection, he says. You nod solemnly, unsure whether it's from spirits, thieves, or overcooked turnips. You walk back to the house slowly, lantern extinguished, charm in your pocket, steps steady. For the first time, you feel not just tolerated, but perhaps included, which is almost as good as surviving, almost as good as back at the house. The morning passes in a haze of gentle bustle. You try to lie down and rest after your moonlit patrol adventures, but the world has already begun its daily ritual of noise and expectation. A broom scratches at the threshold. Someone is chopping garlic with alarming rhythm. A duck makes a noise that feels deliberate. You cover your head with a mat and mutter soft curses in ancient dialects you may or may not be inventing. Eventually, you rise, not because you want to, but because sleep, like your missing sandal, has abandoned you. You make your way outside and find yourself aimlessly wandering past the edges of the village, drawn toward a quiet thicket beyond the last paddies. You walk. Slowly, too tired for real direction, you reach a patch of dry earth beneath a mulberry tree and collapse into it with a sound like an old rug being dropped. Here's where things get strange, or perhaps just strangely normal. You lay there, blinking, up at branches, birds flitting overhead, and an enormous cricket sitting an uncomfortably short distance from your ear. It stares at you. You stare back, and then it screams. Not a chirp, not a song, a full volume, vengeful chirp scream directly into your eardrum. You yelp, you sit up. The cricket, smug as a minor deity, hops 3 inches and resumes its tirade. You relocate slightly. It follows. It is personal now. A mainstream historical fact. Crickets in ancient China weren't just background noise. They were often kept in tiny bamboo cages as pets, prized for their singing. Some emperors kept entire cricket courts. Others believed their chirps could foretell the weather or warn of ghosts. You're pretty sure this one's warning of you. You shift to a shady patch near a pile of flat stones and attempt to nap. It's working. Almost. Until a second sound joins in. A distant, irregular flute. Him again. You crack one eye open. Yes. It's the same enthusiastic flautist from Ghost Night, now seated at the edge of the paddy, passionately playing something. That might be a folk tune, might be a goose mating call, and might just be wishful thinking. You try to embrace it. It's atmospheric, authentic, terrible. You eventually wander back to the house, dazed and lightly insect-bitten, and find a small group seated around a brazier. Someone's roasting sweet potatoes. You're handed one wrapped in parchment. It's soft, hot, and smells like comfort. You sit cross-legged and eat in silence, skin tingling from too much sun, teeth sticky with starch. A child offers you a roasted chestnut. You thank him. He bows. You bow. He giggles and runs away. Someone nearby begins discussing philosophy, not loudly, just conversationally. The phrase, "the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao," floats into the air like steam from the brazier. You nod, as though you've always agreed with that sentiment. Then they segue to a story about a man who tried to live entirely off morning dew and died after 2 days. You're not sure if it's a cautionary tale or dietary advice. A quirky tidbit. Many Taoist mystics did attempt strange diets to reach spiritual purity, refusing grains, eating pine needles, even subsisting on minerals or air. Most of them, predictably, did not thrive. You notice your own breath beginning to slow. The world around you has softened again. People speaking in half whispers, smoke curling into the sky. Even the rooster asleep with its head tucked beneath a wing. You exhale, stretching out beside the brazier, arms behind your head, a belly full of potato and peace. And then the dog starts barking. Violently, frantically. You sit bolt upright just as someone yells from the outer gate. There's commotion. Shoes slapped onto feet, a bowl dropped in surprise. You rush out, heart pounding. It's not an invasion, it's the official tax assessor. Of course it is. He's short, sun-reddened, with a travel-stained robe and a tablet slung over his shoulder like a club. He's come to verify land records, weights of stored millet, and, joy of joys, conduct a quick audit of local documents. Your name is mentioned. You try to vanish into a fruit basket. It does not work, because somehow, you're atrocious. Bamboo slip handwriting from days ago is still in circulation. You are called to clarify it. Your clarification involves a great deal of apologizing and a poorly sketched diagram involving rice. The tax assessor glares at it for a full minute, then laughs, signs his seal with a flourish, and says something about the creativity of local scribes. You are not sure if this is praise or sarcasm, but you will take it. He moves on. You are dismissed. You return to your room and collapse once again onto your mat. The sun is lowering now. The air thickens with the smells of evening cooking. Stewed cabbage, fried scallions, fermented beans that smell like complicated decisions. The shadows stretch long. The dog curls by the hearth. The rooster snores quietly. And the cricket is back. On your windowsill. You look at it. It looks at you. You nod. For now, there is peace. You're nearly asleep when your eyes fly open with a realization both majestic and tragic. You have not bathed today. You groan. Loudly. The cricket on your windowsill seems to pause in its shrieking to acknowledge your suffering. Still, you're too tired to go back to the bathhouse, and too polite to smell like roasted chestnuts and regret at the next mealtime. So, you resort to the ancient Chinese equivalent of a sponge bath. If the sponge is a damp cloth, the water is slightly smoky, and your bathing space is a wooden bucket behind a chicken coop. You splash yourself in silence, scrubbing gently at your arms and face, trying to be dignified while half-clothed beside a bird that is once again watching with judgment. Then a soft knock. You peer around the coop and spot a girl, maybe 12 years old, holding out a folded robe, clean, lightly, perfumed with dried plum blossom. You're not sure where it came from or who gave the order, but you take it like it's a royal gift. You dress. You thank her. She says nothing but grins and sprints off, braid bouncing. The robe fits awkwardly, but it's clean. And tonight, that counts for everything. Back in the house, preparations for bed begin. A few family members are lighting oil lamps, adjusting curtains, rolling out mats. You're handed a cup of warm water, not tea, just water, because anything stronger might disturb the yin energy needed for good sleep. You nod like that's a belief you've always held. Someone says goodnight. Someone else bows. You bow. You're very good at bowing now. You've bowed so much today that your spine creaks in Morse code. You settle onto your mat. You wrap the light blanket around your shoulders. The air is cool, with that early autumn crispness that smells like clay roofs and pine ash. You listen. Dogs bark distantly. Crickets drone their eternal choir. Somewhere nearby, a flute begins to play. It's him again. You sigh, but this time, you smile, you close your eyes, and then, as sleep finally begins to brush your mind with soft fingertips, your stomach growls. It's not loud, just firm. You sit up slowly, look around. Everyone's sleeping. The hearth glows low. You sneak too. The corner where your host family keeps their food offerings. You're not looking for a feast, just something, anything. A cold yam, a dry cracker, a whisper of preserved plum. And then you spot it, a small parcel, carefully tied with twine, sitting. Atop a folded napkin, it has your name written on it, sort of. A character that almost resembles your name, followed by a doodle of a sandal and a goose. You open it slowly. Inside, 2 slices of dried sweet potato, a ball of sticky rice wrapped in leaf, and a sliver of sesame candy so thin it might disappear if you breathe on it. A small note inside reads, "Tomorrow will be strange too. Sleep anyway." You eat the sticky rice first, chewing slowly in the dim glow of the dying hearth. It's soft, slightly sweet, and still warm from wherever it came from. The candy cracks between your teeth like edible starlight. You save the sweet potato for morning. You curl back up on your mat, the letter tucked under your pillow, the taste of kindness lingering in your mouth. A mainstream historical fact. Even in times of hardship, many households in ancient China kept a small reserve of food just for guests. It wasn't about abundance. It was about honor, about saving face, about making sure no one ever felt forgotten. Historians still argue whether hospitality customs were more rigid in the north than the south. But here, in this quiet corner of history, you've never felt more looked after. You finally allow sleep to take you. Your body sinks into the mat like silk folding into silk. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts fade. Except one. Tomorrow is your last full day, and you're still not entirely sure you've earned your place in this strange, beautiful, exhausting world. But you'll try. You wake to soft light and the gentle clink of a ladle against a pot. No bells. No barking. No rooster. Blessedly. just the quiet, familiar rhythm of a household rising before the sun fully crests the horizon. You stretch. Your joints no longer sound like a xylophone made of wet bamboo. Your back only mildly protests. Progress. Outside, the village is beginning its daily transformation. Slow, deliberate, and somehow always ahead of you. Already, smoke is curling from clay chimneys. Someone is feeding ducks. A group of children are gathered around an elder, listening to a tale that probably involves a fox who steals radishes and learns a lesson about humility. You join your host near the hearth. He hands you a bowl of congee, topped with a few slices of preserved root vegetable. Nothing fancy, just hot, filling, and exactly what your stomach, now fully back on speaking terms, needs. After breakfast, you are asked to help fetch water from the well. You nod. The task is familiar now. Almost. Meditative. You walk slowly, bucket in hand, feet scuffing the packed earth, breathing in the cool morning air tinged with ash, earth, and wet stone. At the well, you draw the water, muscles remembering the rhythm. You even manage to not spill it on your feet. You might be becoming competent. On the way back, you pass the old healer's hut. The door is open. She waves you in. You obey. Inside, she wordlessly hands you a folded paper sachet and a tiny carved charm shaped like a gourd. She says it will settle your stomach, balance your sleep, and remind your spirit where your feet belong. You nod respectfully, bowing. Once, just once, perfectly. A mainstream historical fact. Talismans in ancient China weren't just decorative. They were believed to anchor qi, repel illness, protect from unquiet spirits, or ensure safe travel. Every curve, symbol, and material had meaning. Yours smells faintly of cedar and dried mandarin peel. You place it in your robe. Outside, someone's calling your name, or the version of it the village has settled on. You turn to find the teacher from earlier in the week, waving you over. He has a scroll. It's your calligraphy, corrected, neatly, with red marks and several helpful notes, including, consider slowing down your breathing, and these characters resemble soup ingredients. At the bottom, a single phrase. You tried. That matters. You laugh. Genuinely. The day unfolds gently from there. You help untangle a fishing net. You assist in stacking firewood, only dropping it once. You listen to a poem sung over tea, about mountains older than time and a duck who betrayed his landlord. You eat a boiled egg so perfectly cooked it nearly brings tears to your eyes. By afternoon, you're helping set up for a small evening gathering, the kind where neighbors trade gossip, snacks, and ambiguous folk remedies for back pain. As the sun lowers behind the hills, bathing the village in gold, you find yourself perched on a stone near the gate, sipping chrysanthemum tea and watching the sky shift color. You feel calm, not just from the tea, but from the knowledge that you've learned to survive here, not through mastery, but through observation, humility, and repeated failure served with a side of root vegetables. A quirky tidbit. Some Confucian scholars believed the most virtuous life was not one of brilliance, but one of steady, sincere effort. You think maybe they were onto something. The children gather for one last game. Someone sings. Someone else trips and blames a ghost. The flute player begins again, still enthusiastically off-key, and this time no one corrects him. You walk back to the house one last time, robe a little frayed, heart full. You sit beneath the same tree as your first day. The lanterns are being lit again. The village hums with quiet activity. The stars emerge, blinking gently. The rooster, still absent. Somewhere, he approves. You lie down on your mat, the same one. But now, somehow, it feels like yours. You pull the blanket over your shoulders. The wind rustles the paper charms outside. The scent of ginger tea lingers in the air. Your eyes grow heavy. The charm rests beside you, the folded scroll under your mat. The memory of the cricket, the goose, the bathhouse, the bowing, all of it wraps around you like a second blanket. And as your breath slows, the village fades, the night deepens, and finally, you sleep. The fire has burned low now, casting just a soft amber glow across the floor. Your journey through this strange, patient, beautiful place has come to a close, and the rhythm of the village slows with you. No more calls from the rooster, no more honking geese, just the soft creak of old wood, the distant rustle of leaves, and the deep, still hush of history exhaling around you. The night wraps itself around the rooftops. Smoke drifts gently into the stars. A curtain flutters in the breeze. A bamboo wind chime clinks once, then rests. You are warm, you are safe, and you've made it through. Mud-streaked, rice-fed, mildly bruised by herbal medicine, but wiser in the quiet way only slowness can teach. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the sounds blur into each other. Flute, wind, soft laughter fading into silence. Feel your body settle into the mat as though it belongs to the earth itself. Each breath slower, deeper, looser. There's no rush here, no worry, just this moment, the present curling gently into dreams. You are not a stranger anymore. You are part of the rhythm now, the quiet routine, the shared fire, the bowl passed without words. The nod that says, "You tried." Let that final image hold you, the flicker of a lantern across your sleeping face, the rustle of leaves overhead, and the sound of footsteps, far, far away, fading gently into memory. And now, sleep. Soft and slow, ancient and easy, just sleep. Easy.